Hello and welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wade. This is the podcast where we explore population health issues impacting your community. Dissect and Connect is a service of New River Valley Community Services and the Montgomery County Prevention Partners. Kristen Mallory spends most of her time in a wheelchair these days, a constant reminder of the accident that nearly claimed her life almost 8 years ago. Kristen, who was just 16 at the time, and her mother Susan were headed to their home in Chesterfield County, Virginia, on the night of June 9, 2013, when their vehicle was struck by a drunk driver. Kristen was severely injured and continues to struggle with the physical and emotional pain caused by that incident. Despite the many challenges she is now faced with, Kristen works every day to share her story to help prevent others from being harmed by drinking and driving. Along with her parents, Kristen has founded a nonprofit to help spread awareness about the dangers of drinking and driving. The mission of Mallory's movement against drunk driving is to reduce the number of individuals and families impacted by drunk driving through direct education efforts and by educating drivers, future and potential drivers, and passengers about the dangers of driving impaired or being a passenger with an impaired driver. So, Kristen, welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, just getting to know you a little bit, and you are going to be speaking for an event that we're doing here in a couple of weeks. But you have a pretty interesting story to share. Looking at the information that you shared with me prior to our meeting this afternoon, it looks like we're coming up on about 8 years since your accident. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the anniversary is fastly approaching to 8 years. Can't believe it.
Yeah. I'm curious, before the accident, how was your life? What kind of girl was Kristen Mallory prior to the accident?
I've thought about this lately, and I was definitely a carefree, goofy, silly, like I was just always wanting to have fun, very family oriented, and loved hanging out with my friends. Like that was super important to me. I was a dancer beforehand, and so I lived at the dance studio. Like I was a busy bee. Like I didn't, a lot of times I wasn't sitting still. Like it was constantly like school or dance or different rehearsals or like for chorus or church, or I did all different activities, and that was kind of, I feel like that was mostly me. I do know that as a 16-year-old, like before this happened, I was definitely pretty shy as well, though. Like that's one thing that I really do remember. I was shy, and certain situations weren't my favorite. Like I dealt with a lot of anxiety even prior to the accident, and I think I was a normal 16-year-old. I was mean, and mean to my parents. I wasn't really mean to anybody else. I was good in school and everything like that. But I was definitely mean to my parents, and average teenager. I would say, but that's something I definitely remember.
And we're going to talk about some of the injuries that you sustained in the accident. Was your memory impacted at all?
So I have a traumatic brain injury, and so yeah, my memory has been impacted. It kind of depends. Like it's not like one part of my memory. It's kind of, there's things I don't remember. There's things I forget. Like it's just, I think Mom would describe it more as short term, but like, I don't know. To me, it's kind of just, I never know what I'm going to remember or not remember.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, right there with you. Do you recall the evening of the accident itself?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Very, very vividly.
Okay.
So if I could talk about, like, if you want to know about that.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
So I was actually, that day, I spent the day with my cousin. I was going to be supposed to be a bridesmaid in her wedding. I think it was like a week later, I think. And so we were doing like a trial, like hair, makeup, like doing stuff for prepping for the wedding. And Mom came to pick me up. It was kind of late. We had food with my cousin before we left, and then we drove home, which was a 45-minute drive. I I remember having like really bad allergies, and this is just a little like thing that kind of I had some issues with at first because I blamed myself about this. We made a stop at a store, which made us take a different route home. And after we left the store, we didn't go 2 minutes down the road, and we were turning, and this is where I kind of like black out type thing, which I feel lucky that I don't really remember this part. But I remember waking up and had no idea where I was.
Right.
And there was a lot of noise and chaos, but basically I was trapped in a car with the engine sitting on my lap, like fully on my lap. It was crazy. Like the doctors and people said that if he would have gone any faster and the engine would have pushed any farther, I would have been dead instantly. So blessing that that didn't happen. But
for sure,
I was sitting there, and my mom was sitting beside me, and I just remember screaming. And it wasn't long at all before everybody got there to like be with like the firefighters and police officer. But the first person that arrived was a police officer, female police officer, who was a complete angel to me. She held my hand the entire time that the firefighters worked to cut me out, because that took them 45 minutes to cut me out of the car. Mom was able to get it out of the car and get into an ambulance and get away while Dad arrived and stood in front of me, trying to keep me as calm as possible. And that police officer just held my hand the entire time. I didn't find her for a while, but she comes up later in my story. So she was an angel to me. And then once they got me out, 45 minutes later, they rushed me to the hospital, and I was taken to the trauma room. It was a chaotic and scary place to be. Like blood, like infusions, and I don't even know, so many IVs and scans, and they had to set my legs, which was the worst part, most pain. I had no pain meds, nothing, because I had broken both legs, so they had to like pull them. It's just, that was not pleasant at all. But pretty quickly, I was taken back for emergency surgery. The last thing I remember is me telling my dad that I'd see him later, and that the doctors were both telling us that I may wake up without a leg. And that was like heart-wrenching. And then to have to say like, bye, Dad, right after that, it was scary. But I don't remember anything else until I woke up with days later.
Wow. Well, I can't even imagine what you've been through, but can you, in addition to what you already mentioned about your legs, can you talk about some of the other physical injuries that you've suffered?
Yeah, so I broke both femurs, broke both hands. I had a broken collarbone, and I had burns and scabs and all different stuff all over from the airbag and the seatbelt. And then I had the traumatic brain injury. Those were like the initial injuries that I dealt with. They told me at the time that in 9 months from the time that this had happened, I would be back to my normal self. And to me, anybody can do anything for 9 months.
Right.
So that kept me going a lot. Was those, I can picture the end in, like thought I had the end in sight. But it's been hard since then, because after those 9 months and the years later, I've developed many other medical issues and so much other stuff that all goes back to the car crash. So it's been way longer than 9 months, and it's been almost 8 years, and I'm pretty much in a wheelchair most of the time and in severe pain.
And then I think in your bio, or maybe in some conversation with your mother, she mentioned that you take about 50 medications every day. Is that right?
Probably just about that, yeah.
Yeah.
40 to 50, yeah. Daily. I take them 3 to 4 times a day, and then I have, that's not including like the as needed medications that I have. Like, so if panic attacks or pain or any of that type of stuff. And then I also have I wear a pain patch every day. I change it once a week. That helps with my leg pain. And then I have a port placed in my chest, so that I can get IV saline every day at home. It's it's a lot.
I mean, just the medications alone would be a lot for most people to keep up with. So, in addition to the obvious physical injuries that you sustained and the long-term implications of those, can you talk a little bit about how this has impacted your mental and emotional well-being?
Yeah. So my PTSD it's kind of a roller coaster is how I describe it, because there is good times and there's bad times with it. It's not like it's not like this like progression of getting better or anything. Right. So in the beginning, I had horrible like long list of triggers. I still have a very long list of triggers, but I have worked through some of them. Like I'll just like one of the triggers with like way before was white trucks, because that's what he was driving. I don't have that as much. That one is one I don't have as much now, but anytime driving, hearing like sirens or seeing the lights, full panic. Like can't even seeing that like startles me, freaks me out. I have what else? I don't ride in the car with anybody but my parents and my best friend. So I'm really cautious about that and very picky, and that's hard because it limits me obviously to what I can do, and I'm already limited. And there's a lot of other triggers, and it just I have to work really hard with counseling. Counseling is like a big thing that I've done from day one, just to work through all the PTSD and anxiety and depression, because I'd say the anxiety is really hard because there's always a fear that something else is going to happen, like medically, or I'm going to get bad news, or just there's so like I have anxiety is really bad. And then my depression is just it comes and goes, and I have to just see how I'm doing and there's things I can do for it, but not, it's like medication and trying to find joy with the things that I do, but not much will help like in that state of depression. And I just think that emotionally it's taken such a toll on me in just ways that like I'm not independent anymore. Like I used to be this really independent person, and now I have to rely on somebody for like almost everything.
Right.
I mean, everything's a work in progress. So obviously we're working on getting me more independent, but right now it's really hard because for me, it's an emotional game because I have to remind myself like these people want to help me, but I don't want to have their help, and I feel bad. So I have a lot of guilt. Guilt is something I deal with a lot. Guilt that my mom has to help me with stuff. Guilt that my dad has to go to work and work all these hours to pay for all the financial stuff. Just guilt that, I mean, there's so much guilt. I say I'm sorry probably 100 times a day. So it's all the emotional stuff will be forever a work in progress. But luckily I've started a new therapy for my PTSD, and I'm only in the very beginning stages, but I've already seen a lot of good coming from it. So there's positives.
That's great to hear. That's great that you're finding some. Well, I appreciate you sharing and being so open with us about that. I think that's good for people to hear. So thank you for that. And I guess the other part too that I've been curious about, Kristen, and we'll talk about this in a bit. You constantly are out there sharing your story and kind of reliving those moments on that fateful night. That's got to be draining in a lot of different ways. How do you handle that?
Well, sharing my story and being out there is what it fuels me.
Mm-hmm.
It gets me out of bed every day. I love what I do. I will say that before anything. I love what I do.
Yeah.
But there is definitely draining parts of it. I mean, I'm not just sharing my story, but I'm also going to all these doctor's appointments. So physically it is exhausting every week, like looking at the schedule, what doctor's appointments, and then what talks and balance. The balance is it's a struggle, like still to this day, finding the right balance of what's good for me, but what isn't too much and not too little that makes me get down in the dumps. But I would say that there's days where it's really hard to talk about it, but I don't usually show that. It's kind of just an internal thing. And then there's days that I'm proud of it, and I'm always proud of what I'm doing, but I feel more confident with it, and I'm good. But it's always going to be a draining thing. Like, I'm wiped out after I tell my story. It's a lot, and a lot has happened in 8 years, and I want people to know about that, but it's also it's taxing. And I don't know, it's just, obviously, like I said, it's the joy, and it's brought me the most happiness that I've had, and I really couldn't see myself doing anything else right now with my life, and no plans of stopping. I always am asking for more and more and more. And sometimes I have to be reminded, slow your roll, girl. Like, slow your roll. But I love it, and it's good for me, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sure. And for those of you who are listening, before we got started today, Kristen shared with me that she had already done 3 presentations today before hopping on the podcast interview. So she's definitely a go-getter and out there and sharing her story. And that is commendable and admirable in so many ways.
Well, thank you.
And I know without a doubt that your story is having an impact on folks, but what do you hope they get out of listening to you and hearing your story?
Big thing is I want people to get the message of the danger of getting behind the wheel after drinking alcohol. No matter if it's one sip, one glass, or the amount the guy who hit us took, which was a lot. I really want people to get that. I think some other things are like, call for a ride. Like, I never tell anybody not to drink. Obviously if you're underage, I definitely think better not to do that. But if you're going to drink and you need a ride home, call. Like, it's just better that, like, people are might be upset or whatever, but there's so many options out there. There's friends, and then there's family, and there's Uber and Lyft, and there's so many different things now available that people need to just take advantage of it. And I don't know why people don't. Like, it's right there. It's such an easy thing to do. Something else I'd like to talk, like, I really hope, is planning ahead. Like, you can go have fun, but before you go have fun, think about, okay, well, what is my plan to get home, or that type of thing. And that way you're not in a situation where you're like had alcohol and everything, and you're intoxicated and have to make that decision, because your decision probably not going to be the best at that point.
Sure.
But then there's also just the thing that I want people to know is that not to take things for granted in life. I definitely was somebody who I feel like everybody takes things for granted in some way. But I know, looking back, I can name so many things I took for granted, the littlest to the biggest things. And that's one of the biggest messages, if I was to say, that's not related to like alcohol, that I would say to do. that is I want people to understand. Like, it's not to take things for granted, and that it's just not worth it. Like, it's really not. I definitely feel like if I can just impact one life, that I've done my job. And obviously I hope I impact more, but just impacting one person is all that I ask for, and that one person does something differently because of me, or I don't know. Just like I said, I love what I do. I can't say that enough, but I really take it seriously, and there's just so much that I want people to learn. Like, I don't want other people to have to be in this situation that I'm in.
Yeah, I'm just impressed when I see, I watched your video, your documentary, and just interactions I've had with your mom over the last week or so. It's pretty amazing the different audiences that you've spoken to. I mean, you've spoken in schools, universities, with faith-based groups, and you've spoken in prisons.
Yep.
So,
so
tell me about those experiences. What's that been like?
I would say it's been a great experience. Definitely never thought that was going to be something that I did, but seeing the response that I get from the offenders when I go, because we go and we talk to a certain group. It's all about teaching. This class is teaching the offenders what about a certain crime type each week, and what that things that crime had effect on that victim, and how their effect, like what their actions did to somebody else. So the first thing they learn is it's not about you,
right?
Because they're very about themselves. But when I go in there, they're full of tears. All the men are crying. I mean, the ladies cry too, but seeing the men cry, mom and dad go with me and they share as well. And I think that's been a big thing too, because a lot of them are parents,
right?
And they see the impact that it's had on both my parents. Dad is usually crying, and it makes me and mom cry, because he doesn't open up about his feelings often. And so when we hear it, it's just emotional, and it's healing for us. And I know it's healing for him, but it's hard. I mean, just like we said, it's draining, but the offenders they receive it so well. And the interactions we have with them are really great. I've really never had a bad experience.
That's great.
And I hope that when I'm going in there, that they realize not just about drinking and driving, because that's not the only reason I go in there, but that they have victims too, and that their actions have impacted somebody else, and I hope they think about that other person and what their actions have done to them. Most of them probably have had drunk and drive before, because that's just something they usually will even say, like that's just something they did, but that's not why they're there, which is very interesting to me that they open up about that. But it's just such a good feedback that, like, oh, I never realized this would happen from that. Like, you never think about, and it's true, you never think about the other side, right, like, of what's going on.
Yeah. I'm curious, through this process over the last almost 8 years now, and obviously you've been impacted severely in physical, emotional, mental ways. Are there things that you can point to in the time that's passed and think to yourself, that's a good thing that's come out of this? That's a way that I've improved, that I've gotten better or grown as a person. Are there any of those that you look back and you actually see it as a positive?
Yeah, I would probably definitely say yes. Trying to think, there's so many things that I think about, and I'm just like, wow, that happened for a reason.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like, for example, I think one of the biggest things, this was the whole reason and the whole start to my journey of sharing my story wouldn't have happened if I didn't request a meeting with the offender that had impacted or that hit us, which that was a process in itself. But the reason I asked for that meeting and had that meeting was because I was absolutely terrified of him, and my anxiety was so bad that I thought this man was going to get out and hurt me. And I was young. I didn't understand the court process. I thought he was mad at us. That beginning stage was very hard for me. So once I did that meeting through the Department of Corrections, that is actually the way that I got asked for my first ever speaking engagement.
Okay.
And so I think back and I'm like, well, if I didn't have that anxiety and fear, which was absolutely horrible for everybody involved,
right,
I would not be speaking and have some of the friends and the experiences and the job and anything. Like, that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, I found my why. Like, that's something that I asked for a year, 2 years, 3, a few years before, like after the crash, that before I figured it out. Like, why did this happen? Like, why did it happen to me? Like, that's something that I always was asking myself. Like, why me? Like, what did I do to deserve this? But I think I realized in the whole process that my why was because I needed my story to be really impactful, and so that I could share it with others. So even though I've gotten so many medical diagnoses and dealt with so many emotional and physical and lost so many friends through this and everything, it's all part of the why, because now it makes my story so much more real.
Yeah.
And it has made me realize ultimately, like, this is what I want to do with my life, and this is why it happened. So I think those are two big things, like finding my why and realizing that my anxiety and all that fear was for a reason and was worth it.
Well, it's pretty amazing that you took a situation that was so horrible for you and your family, and you've turned it into something positive. I think that's pretty remarkable. And not everybody in your shoes would have taken this approach. And so I'm curious. I know that there are obviously days when you are down probably more than others, and you probably hurt on some days more than others. But how, in a general sense, do you keep from being bitter and angry about this whole thing? I mean, I think a lot of people in your situation would just be really just upset, and as you said, the why me part would be something that a lot of people would not let go of and continue to ponder without having that clarity. And you've been able to find that. What do you attribute all that to?
I think the reason that I haven't been as much bitter and everything, it really all goes to like the fact that I have the family support. I have my parents' support 100%.
Right.
We're so much closer now. I mean, incredibly close. Sometimes I think we're too close. Me and my mom know what we're going to say or what we're thinking, or it's bad sometimes. But I may have lost friends and family, but I have gained more love, I feel, from my parents, and I have gained more friends, like the best friends and the friends that are there to support me and to cheer me on and to tell me to just keep me going.
Yeah.
I've gained those friends. And I still have those things that I make sure that I have those things that bring me joy. talking about my story and everything, sharing my story brings me joy, but being able to go and do my dance class and all of that gives me the outlet that I can to not take it out on somebody else or to be so frustrated inside.
Yeah.
I've just been able to find those things that I'm really grateful for and that I have that I wouldn't have without it, and that I have those outlets, and I just feel more fulfilled. And there definitely are times where I am angry and I say, I'm going to be so mad just for an hour, but I try to not allow myself to be angry and that much for that much time, because it just doesn't do me any good. Sometimes it's good to be a little angry, but then I got to let it go.
That's something we could all learn from.
Definitely looking at the 16-year-old me, which we talked about in the beginning, compared to the traits that I have now. I love the me now. Like, who I am now is way better than the person that I was. And I would like to change the physical and like all those things, but I really wouldn't change anything because it's made me who I am today. And I do love that about myself. Like, I am proud to be a wheelchair user. Like, it's hard, but I'm proud to do it. I'm proud that I have found my voice. I used to be this shy kid who I wouldn't always stand up for myself, and now I will stand up for myself without a doubt. And I have found my voice. Sometimes I use it in loud ways, which I shouldn't use, but I use it mostly for powerful to get my story across. But I would say those are some of the things that really have kept me from being bitter.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, not even really knowing your mom and dad, but just knowing how far in this journey they've come with you along by your side. You are obviously the product of two incredible people who happen to be your parents, and so shout out to both of them for the amazing job that they've done in raising you.
They deserve all the shout outs because they have dealt with a lot, and they have been just such amazing, like I said, so parents, like in general. Yeah. I don't know if I could have done it.
Well, Kristen, very excited about you being with us for the presentation on June 1st. And if you're listening to this, make sure you mark your calendars and join us for that evening. That's June 1st. It's a Tuesday. We'll start at 7 p.m. and that's on the Giles Youth Adult Partnership Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/Giles YAP. So be sure to tune in. Kristen's going to share more of her story and also take your questions. So if you have questions that night, feel free to put those in the comments section of the Facebook feed. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to get to talk to everybody, answer questions, and share more of my story.
Yeah, Kristen told me a little while ago that no questions are off limits, so she's ready for you.
Yes.
It has been an immense pleasure to speak with you and to get to know you a little better. And you are welcome back on this show anytime.
Oh, well, anytime you ask, I'll come.
All right.
I'm all for it.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that.
Yes, hold me to it.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dissect and Connect is sponsored by Teen Connections, a leadership program through Planned Parenthood South Atlantic that empowers youth with the facts about sexual health and the skills to build stronger, healthier relationships. It's free, totally virtual, and you can earn $100 when you graduate as a Teen Connections peer educator in your community. Join a Teen Connections program from home today. For more information, be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dissect and Connect podcast. To learn more about Montgomery County Prevention Partners, our New River Valley Community Services, be sure to check us out on Facebook or visit nrvcs.org/podcast.